little girl, daughter, sister, girlfriend, fiancé, wife, cousin, mother, auntie, grandmother, great grandmother, elder, disappears, shattering, a family, a community, the world. There is something we can all do. Remember them.
Hello, my friends. How are you? I hope today has been amazing, and I hope that you have absorbed all the energy that you could possibly imagine this week. This has been a wonderful week, and with plenty on tap for the rest of the week, so I'm pretty excited. Before I get started tonight, answering a wonderful question. I know I've answered before, but it's always worth restating. We want to make sure we call out all of you who have followed and subscribed wherever that is, and we want to say how much we appreciate, and I deeply appreciate you taking that time to do that. If you haven't had a chance to do so, now is that time. Go ahead and follow, subscribe wherever you're listening. You won't be disappointed, hopefully. Hopefully, I will provide you with some information along the way. Tonight, of course, Sporks Mall. We want to give a huge shout out to New Reality TV, newrealitytv.com, of course, streaming channel dedicated to all of the spiritual perspectives available, and hopefully one that resonates with you to help you along your spiritual journey, along your evolutionary path. So check them out, newrealitytv.com. You won't be disappointed. Okay. Tonight, a wonderful topic, and again, we've talked about it before, but it's always, like I said, worth restating the facts. Am I honoring or borrowing when we talk about absorbing this cultural influence, this cultural energy from all around us, wherever that may be? So, wonderful topic tonight, and I think it's always relevant. So, always a good thing to talk about. For those of you who haven't had a chance, please visit our website at akoutlaw.org. Now, it's now a nonprofit, so you can check those out. And they are over there. At the bottom of that page, you'll find a big orange button. It says Ask Me Questions. By all means, ask questions there. And if I make a show out of it, then I get, let's see if I can do another hand signal. Wait, I'm going the wrong way. There we go. I can send you a free shirt, and it's always worth having a free shirt, right? You can't go wrong. You know, when the day between laundry days, it's always nice to have an extra shirt around. So check that out, ask your question, and again, we'll get you an answer, right? For those of you who may have questions and nagging thoughts and comments that you want to make tonight, by all means, our Facebook chat is open, so is all of our other chats. We can see all of the posts wherever you're watching us. So throw it out there. Let's talk about it. Tonight, again, we're talking about honoring versus borrowing, and talking about cultural appropriation versus association or affiliation, and looking at what that means. Now, many of you have brought to my attention, and by all means, it's a completely valid point, and that's the idea of this adoption of a lot of the Norse symbolism to portray, I guess, probably a good word, portray a mindset that just quite honestly was not affiliated in any way, shape, or form with my Norse ancestors, for sure. So let's talk about it. Let's put the cards on the table. Of course, the first card that we have to talk about here is white supremacy. And white supremacy, of course, has tried to adopt a lot of the Norse symbolism to kind of make their rhetoric seem more appropriate. And for those individuals who follow that line of thinking and think that Norse had anything to do with that in whatsoever shape or form, are absolutely clueless about history. Firstly and foremost, my ancestors, particularly those of Danes, and I think I can speak pretty clearly for all the Icelandic, the Swedes, and the Nords when I say, first and foremost, we were surviving, and we were traders. We traded goods all up and down the North Sea and around the coast there, all the way down into the Mediterranean. I mean, these guys were always looking for ways to trade goods. That was kind of their MO. Now, were there individuals that involved themselves in the act of Viking? Absolutely, yes. And there have been individuals within society who have always engaged throughout known history anyway, have engaged in some form of Viking. Now, Viking is a verb, first and foremost, and it is meant to do things that are, well, vying for kinship, is the way my grandfather put it to me, in that they were trying to conquer lands and all the peoples and all the things in a desire, in a quest to obtain the financial resources necessary to support their own country, their own kingship, their own lands, whatever, right? So they were borrowing, and of course there were individuals throughout the world who were not so keen on them making withdrawals from these centers, and therefore they engaged in maybe some conflict. So it's normal, and it's happened throughout all of existence. But this doesn't, in no way does this call out, highlight any idea of sexism, racism, or any other isms, right? My ancestors, when people came to town, when people came and joined their clan, their skin color had nothing to do with anything. Nothing. Zip. If they could build a house, or they could mend a ship, or fix a fishing net, or they had some other skill that was appropriate, and they were honorable men and women, they were accepted as honorable men and women. Skin color had nothing to do with it. So for those individuals who promote any kind of isms associated with the Norse of antiquity, please do some research. One of the other isms that I hear quite a bit about is sexism, in that being Norse and a Viking and all of these nonsense is to be male. To be particularly a large white male would be ideal, with blonde hair. Well, firstly and foremost, understand a little bit of history, and this is a little bit of history lesson for you. Within Norse society, long before it was semi-fashionable anywhere, women had equal rights to men. They had permissions to marry and divorce. They could inherit lands. They could do commerce. They could sit on a council of a round table, a council to the king. Although there is no recorded that I'm aware of, and for those of you out there who are more skilled in the archaeology here, I'm sure there are a few women along the way whom led their clans. So this whole ism garbage that we hear on the internet and everywhere about, and particularly associating it with Norse symbolism, the runes, particularly the god symbols, Odin's, his Volknut, several other of the very Norse symbolism. If you associate anything other than living an honorable, clean life with those symbols, you've misinterpreted them. That's just the way it is. But let's talk about some other cultures. Let's talk about the indigenous peoples throughout the world, wherever they may be. And while I know a lot of the questions, and Kellen asked specifically in the rest of his post, he asks more about how, where do I cross the line to becoming, taking over a particular indigenous culture when Well, firstly and foremost, we have to address two real big elephants in the room, right? The first elephant is that what's your bloodline? When we talk about cultures, while we can associate with many different cultures throughout the world and throughout history, all well and good, but where is your personal ancestry to it? Is there a personal ancestry to it? That's not a deal cincher, and it's not a deal breaker, all right? It's just understanding your connection to that culture. That's more important, all right? So that's an important piece. It is not a deal breaker as to, if I feel, quite honestly, I meet with a lot of people, particularly indigenous peoples throughout the world, really, and one of the things they know about me is that I'm not them. I'm not one of them. I was not born with their blood. I have none of their blood in me. I am a Dane, and I'm an Irish Dane, to be honest. And that's where I roll. That's me, right? And so I don't try to pretend or miscommunicate that I'm anything other than that. Do I have an appreciation for your culture and your dance and your music and your food and the clothings and your rituals? Absolutely. Which leads us to the second point. Appreciation for a particular culture or group, particularly in history, means we have an appreciation for it. It's an intrinsic thing. We have an appreciation for it. And when you appreciate something intrinsically, you don't disrespect it. You don't cast it. You don't ever cast it in a dark or even unwanted light. You always do what's right. You do what's best for it. And if that means walking away, then that's what it means, right? I can't, because I don't want to misrepresent, I don't want to disrespect that culture. So when we think about culture, we're thinking about two different things, right? We're thinking about the bloodline, and that's the physical form. Are we actually connected to that culture, that society at all in our physical real time? And then two, what is our appreciation of that culture? Is it teaching us something? Is it giving us something that we can give energy back into, right? So we're creating a circulation. And then for me, one of the big signing notices that are always hanging over my door is that when there are all these rules and stipulations, you have to wear blue shoes on a Friday to be part of this crew. Well, then, no thanks. I'm good. Thank you. Because if I have to influence or I have to manipulate the situation in order to be associated with it, then it's not right. Remember, our ancestry, our cultural adoption, affiliation, should be very much akin to our spirituality. It should make sense in our brain. This is the bloodline, right? It makes sense in our brain. And should feel right in our heart. And this is the appreciation, right? So that's really where these two pieces kind of fit into. Are we honoring or are we absconding with, right? Now, to say that absconding is a bad thing is not wholly accurate, because sometimes it's good to abscond with a culture. One of the things that is a personal reveal for me is that when I began my understanding of my ancestry, and I really began to invest myself in understanding more about it, I immersed myself in it. I ate the foods that were documented for those periods. I embraced Danish culture today by the food and the drink and the even the clothing and some of my mannerisms, and I'm learning the language and all of these things to appreciate. See, there's the heart coming up and appreciating that culture. One of the things I did, this is a while ago now, but when King Frederick came into power and Queen Marguerite II stepped down, this was just a couple years ago. I want to say a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. Time is a blur, I apologize. But I did a welcoming to the king. Welcome to the new king and queen and the princes and princesses. Welcome to the royal family. Welcome to, becoming the king. Congratulations. And I wish Queen Marguerite the absolute best. She's been a very long reigning queen. The other name's escaping me at the moment. So it's those kinds of things. I appreciate those things, right? I appreciate the swells of Denmark, the lands, particularly my family's history comes from a town in the northern part of the Jutland of Denmark called Bjerreby, and Bjerreby is a very small town. You really could drive right past it without a matter of fact. It's real easy because the highway is like about a kilometer to the west from Bjerreby, and so you drive right past it, and you'd never miss it. You'd never. Whoops, right? Bjerreby is about 7 kilometers short of the North Sea from the north, and it's about 7 kilometers from the western coast of the Jutland of Denmark into the North Sea. So it's kind of right there in that corner. But again, learning about this, appreciating it, and just really absorbing all I could about the culture, the lands, the peoples, the everything about it allowed me to really honor, I would suspect, honor that culture in my life. And I represent it, I hope I represent it very well today here in the United States. Of course, I'm located here in South Central Alaska, and but I very much appreciate the whole idea of being a Dane, of being Danish. So I think therein lies some of the difference between borrowing and absconding. And again, absconding, there's limits, right? But as long as you're using those two parts, right? If you're honest and you're pure of heart with this thing, with this culture, whatever culture it happens to be, just because there is no bloodline, there is no physical bloodline. A very good friend of mine practices, just really understands some of the South American, the Mayan culture, and he's really invested in the culture. He follows their understandings of the gods and how the gods aligned and what the gods did for humankind and all of those things, and follow some of their rituals, and so he does it honorably. He does it from his heart, and yet he has no way to prove of his Mayan descent. I mean, the records are kind of sketchy at best, so he would be very hard pressed. And I don't know if he has yet. It's been a couple of weeks since I've seen him now, and he was investigating that end of things. But again, So whether we're connected now, one of the things I spoke about this morning when we talked about the Council of Elders within the mind, we talked about this idea that this ancestral thing, this bloodline, is a prime example. The bloodline is only viable, its only real connection is here on the physical plane. Once we depart, once we leave this physical form and we ascend into the spiritual realm, that definition of our ancestries goes away. It vanishes. Now, as we move into the spiritual realm, as we adopt more of a spiritual view in the world, we see that any entity whom has spent time on this physical plane is an ancestor. They've had physical experiences before our own, right? In our mental construct of time, in the spiritual realm, obviously the construct of time is non-existent, and so, but nonetheless, if these spiritual entities are willing to advise and guide and just speak with us, we are looking to them as our ancestors, and the bloodline part of it doesn't matter, right? Matter of fact, I have an ancestor. It's kind of a roundabout way, bloodline, ancestor, roundabout way, who was came from the southern part of France, and they brought with them their practice of voodoo, as we call it here in the United States, voodoo, and voodoo. Those beliefs are very, very, very strong, and so I have that in my blood somewhere. Yet, when I was a boy, and I've written about it in a book, hopefully that'll be out this year or next, that talks about my experiences during a time that I spent personally growing up in southern Louisiana. And in southern Louisiana, of course, that energy, that spiritual connection is everywhere in Louisiana. It is just abundant, particularly as you get further south, like into New Orleans or, the southern areas there. And just connecting with that energy was amazing. And I had trace relatives according to a bloodline. So, but again, the energy was amazing, and I so look forward to going back one day and being able to absorb it now that I kind of know what it is. I really look forward to it. So it's pretty exciting. So when we talk about honoring or borrowing, sometimes borrowing is not a bad idea. Sometimes, if our heart is involved and our heart is willing to help us to align with that view, many times one of the things I always talk about is the 9 noble virtues of the Norse people: courage, honor, those things. So there's 9 of them. But if you look across cultures and you look across many different warrior cultures, you're going to find those very similar 7 or 9 noble values, noble virtues that really make us want to be better people, a better version of ourselves. And if that is what you're able to accomplish from adopting a culture that may not even be your own, but you've adopted this culture, and now you're having this flood of honor and these values kind of seeping into your system, and making you a better version of yourself, then you're in the right place. Doesn't matter if you can, technically tattoo the thing on your body. That is not as important as the spirit that moves it. I see many times on the internet now the memes that say, the carriage is not as important as the cargo inside. That's paraphrasing, of course, but nonetheless, it means the same thing. Your body is not as important as your spirit that is carrying, that is moving you forward, right? That is evolving you towards your destination, whatever that is, wherever your destiny lies, and you're evolving towards that. So, not nearly as important. So, when we think about borrowing and the like, Kellen, I want you to know is that it's not as important as how well you honor this culture, whatever it is, this heritage, this family. All right? If you think of it that way, and you immediately, you're leading with your heart, not with your mind, but with your heart, those values, those virtues that are typically instilled in all cultures to some extent, those things are going to start permeating through. And if they're making you a better version of yourself, then you are in the right place. Don't listen to those who would demean or discredit you or the culture because they haven't found theirs. I know I grew up a very long time, as you can tell by the beard. But I grew up a lot of my life before I actually discovered my culture and my heritage, my family. And so for a very long time, my brother and I, my mother, we thought we were alone. We were the only ones. And so we were kind of out there, isolated, away from everyone. For, I didn't start looking into my ancestries until my 30s. So, I mean, we're talking 30 years. I was convinced that I was pretty much alone, right? So, and it wasn't until then that I, started adopting this culture and this way and this heritage and this family, and I really, really felt it move my heart, move me to become a better version of myself, of being honorable, of being courageous, of being hospitable, of being industrialness, of all these skills that the Norse believed in as being kind of the cornerstone of a good life, so to speak. I was beginning to adopt them and embrace them. So when it's bettering, when it's making you a better version of you, and you never have to discredit someone else to make yourself better, you're in a good place. I hope that answers your question, Kellen. I hope that it gets you to a place in your life where you understand that, in the big picture of things, you have one person that you need to kind of consolidate all this with, and that's yourself. You need to love you. You need to be with you. You need to understand you and how you're interpreting this world. And if whatever you're adopting is making you a better version of you, and that you're able to adopt things or interpret things in your world in a better way, in a happier way, in a more comfortable way, then you do indeed find a culture and a heritage that applies to you, regardless of what your bloodline says. All right? Well, I hope this helps. If for those of you who may have any other questions about this topic or any other topic, by all means, feel free, like I said, hit the webpage. Down at the bottom, you see a big orange button right in the middle of the page. You can't miss it. Huge and orange. And ask that question. Let's get a show. If I get a show about it, I'll send you a free shirt. And a free shirt that you can keep and wear and use and whatever you need to do. All right? So, great stuff to happen. I do want to give a shout out again to newrealitytv.com for those of you who haven't had a chance, may not have heard. By all means, check them out. A beautiful collection of just a kaleidoscope of perspectives of a spiritual journey, our spiritual journey, and one will resonate with you and help you along your path. So hopefully you will find that one. All right, my friends, have a wonderful evening. Thank you for joining me tonight on Sporksball. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning, where we'll be back with Belly Sneak, and we'll talk about some morning ancestral illumination. All right, have a wonderful evening. Good night.
You've been watching For Felina's Belly Snake, a special production of Whispers of the Norse, brought to you by the Alaska akulfhednar in South Central Alaska. Guidance and wisdom, courtesy of an ancient Celtic Norse shaman. Thank you so much for joining us today.